6 years. That's how long I'd been at Halcyon Systems, building frameworks, cleaning up bloated product flows, and designing experiences that turned failing client portfolios into multi-million-dollar wins. I wasn't loud about it. I never needed to be. My work spoke louder than any pitch deck. At least I thought it did. The morning of the all-hands meeting, there was a buzz in the air. People were whispering in corners, nodding toward me in the hallways with knowing looks. Even the executive assistant, Lorena, gave me a soft smile and mouthed, "Congrats," as I passed the coffee station. I didn't respond, superstition maybe. I just held onto my ceramic mug a little tighter and kept walking. The conference room filled quickly. Screens flickered to life. The CEO, Brennan Kessler, stood front and center, flanked by our retiring director of product vision, Daria Lang. She'd been my mentor from day one. No nonsense, hyper-rational, but fair to the core. When she told me last quarter, "You're ready for this role," sell, I believed her. And for once, I let myself believe in timing. Today marks a new chapter. Brennan began, his voice polished like a keynote speaker. Daria has set the bar high. We needed someone with bold ideas, team spirit and vision. After careful consideration, we're proud to announce our new director of product vision. A brief pause. I smoothed the hem of my navy dress and sat taller. Callum Grayer. Applause erupted. My hands moved before I told them to. I clapped. Once. Twice. Like an automaton. My ears rang with static as Callum stood to shake hands, his tailored blazer somehow more smug than he was. He beamed, waving like he'd just won an Emmy. Daria looked down at her hands. She didn't clap right away. Callum took the mic and thanked Brennan HR and everyone who helped him grow. He threw a nod my way. And of course, Selvine Harlow, whose insights taught me so much this past year. I smiled. I'm still not sure how, but it held just long enough to sell the illusion that I was fine, that this was fine. When the applause faded and chairs began to scrape back, I stayed seated, hands folded in my lap, eyes fixed on a smear of old dry erase ink on the far wall. It wasn't fine, but I knew now exactly what kind of game I was in and who I was sitting across from. I still remember my first week at Halcyon back when I was just an unpaid intern with a lone, heavy degree and a secondhand laptop that wheezed every time I opened a Figma file. I stayed late that first Friday night reorganizing a broken navigation model for a client in crisis. No one asked me to. I just didn't want our team to fail on a launch that already felt like it was hanging by threads. Monday morning, that model was in the CEO's inbox, and no one questioned where it came from. No one asked, so I didn't say. That silence became a habit. Within 18 months, I went from UX associate to product flow specialist. By the third year, I was ghost-fixing major systems before meetings, the kind of tasks no one sees but everyone benefits from. Design bottlenecks disappeared, churn went down, clients renewed. I built stability, quietly. Then came Callum Grayer. He joined 2 years after me wearing unearned confidence like a tailored suit. He wasn't malicious, just slippery, always arriving 10 minutes late with a grin and some joke about traffic. His desktop stayed suspiciously clean. His Slack statuses always read meeting even when he wasn't logged into a call. But what he lacked in work ethic, he made up for in timing. He had an uncanny way of surfacing when senior leadership passed by, offering coffee, chiming in with practiced enthusiasm, asking softball questions that made executives feel brilliant. I'd be shoulder deep in a redesign sprint, while Callum discussed the Warriors game with Brennan like they'd grown up together. I noticed it. Of course I did. I noticed the way my ideas would suddenly echo back to me a week later in Callum's voice, during a cross-functional update. I noticed how he asked to review my outlines, then slipped phrases from them into his roadmap demos. But I didn't say anything. I told myself it didn't matter who said it first, only that the work got done. That results would reveal the truth in the end. They didn't. The morning after the announcement, I found myself wondering how many of the things I'd given freely had helped build the illusion that now stood at the helm of my department. And worse, how many of them I had handed over willingly. 2 days after the promotion, Callum stopped by my desk with the bounce of someone who believed his own mythology. "Need your magic touch on this client deck," he said, sliding over a half-done outline. "You're the detail whisperer, Cell. Detail whisperer, execution queen, UX ninja." I'd heard them all. Compliments dressed like respect, but always a few rungs below the credit line. I told myself it didn't matter. Just get the job done. That week blurred into late nights. I rebuilt Callum's proposal from scratch, cleaned the language, tightened the case. Studies added the strategic mapping he couldn't name but would recite later. He signed off with a thumbs-up emoji. No notes, no questions. When Friday came, we kicked off the new client partnership with a full leadership summit. Callum, now Director Grayer, stood at the front of the glass-paneled boardroom in a fresh navy suit and slick hair that hadn't met a late night. Excited to present a vision I've developed over the past few weeks, he began clicking into the first slide. My slide, my timeline, my UX projections, the roadmap I had spent 14 days building layer by layer, pain point by pain point, based on months of feedback analytics and first-hand research. He walked through every beat like he had lived it, nodded at the parts I had agonized over, joked about how hard it was to get stakeholder buy-in, then smiled right at me as if we were in on the performance together. No one questioned it. They clapped when he finished. Brennan called it exactly the kind of clarity we need. Callum basked in it like he'd authored the alphabet. Afterward, he leaned down beside me and murmured, "Couldn't have done it without you." Then he walked off, already fielding new calendar invites. I sat in that same chair long after the room emptied, fingers on my notepad, but not moving. I had built the scaffolding, the skeleton, the skin, and now I was watching my own work walk around into someone else's suit. And I knew then it wouldn't stop there. It happened by accident. I was walking past the east hallway toward the UX lab when I heard my name. "Selvine, she's brilliant," no doubt Callum was saying. His voice carried that casual humility he used like seasoning, measured, persuasive, always performative. But between us, I'm starting to worry she's having trouble adapting. She's been resistant to collaboration lately, struggling to scale. I froze just outside the conference room, heart thudding. "Struggling," he repeated, lowering his voice. "We're trying to move fast. Her solo approach. It's not sustainable at the leadership level." The other voice belonged to Mia, our VP of product. She gave a non-committal, the kind that could tilt either way. Papers shuffled. Laughter followed. Then the sound of a coffee mug being lifted. Casual, effortless erosion. I kept walking. By the time I reached the elevator, I wasn't sure if I was more angry or embarrassed. He wasn't just taking credit anymore. He was priming them for my removal, chipping away at my credibility in quiet rooms, framing my precision as inflexibility, my autonomy as dysfunction. And it was working. That week, I was suddenly removed from a beta testing initiative I'd been leading for months. Mia reassigned it to Callum's team. The reasoning, we need cross-functional leadership now. No one looked me in the eye when they told me. Even little things shifted. Meeting invites stopped, including me by default. A junior designer I'd mentored was moved under Callum's wing with the note that he needed more visibility. It all felt engineered. Too precise to be coincidence, too familiar to be accidental. I went home that Friday with a migraine behind my eyes and a tension knot in my neck that wouldn't release. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, calculating timelines in my head, how long it would take, at this rate, for my role to become redundant. Not terminated, just quietly erased. I'd seen it happen to others. The work slowly reassigned, the projects diverted, the narrative rewritten in meeting rooms you were no longer invited to. I had always believed loyalty earned protection. Now I understood loyalty only protects those who know how to weaponize it. The HR email arrived at 9:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. "Hi, Selvine. As part of our quarterly talent audit, we're collecting performance reviews from leadership. You've been selected for early cycle feedback. Please schedule a check-in with your direct manager this week. My stomach tightened. Random, they called it. Callum acted surprised when I brought it up. Oh, right, he said, scrolling through his phone. Yeah, let's knock that out Wednesday. Should be quick. We met in one of the glass cubes they called collaboration pods. He didn't bring notes. You're solid, he said, leaning back. Execution-wise, you're top tier. Consistent, reliable, execution-wise. Nothing about strategy, nothing about vision, nothing about the roadmaps I'd built, the frameworks he now recycled weekly. Just that I executed well like a printer or a plugin. I stared at him as he rattled off generic HR-safe phrases. Valuable asset, strong performer, bit independent, but that's your style, right? Later that afternoon, I passed by the exec lounge and caught sight of a slide deck on Callum's tablet. I knew that shade of green. I had built that campaign, every data model, every audience cluster. The final framework hadn't been shared yet, except with him. He was about to present my unreleased work as his own again. And this time, there'd be no trail. The files had come from me, yes, but clean, complete, and internal. Nothing traceable, unless I made it traceable. That night, I opened the original project folder and created a decoy version, subtly incorrect user data, mislabeled cohorts, projections that looked reasonable but would unravel under scrutiny. Harmless enough not to derail the company, but visible enough to cause confusion in the room. I renamed it just like before, sent it to him in our usual shared folder. Even added a "let me know if you have questions" message, just to keep things familiar. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I stared at the screen for a long moment after the notification faded. If he was going to keep stealing from me, I wanted to know exactly how far he'd go when no one was watching. The board presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning, 10 a.m. sharp. Brennan himself had cleared his calendar for it, which meant pressure, visibility, consequences. I took my seat near the back of the conference hall, just behind the director of finance and to the left of HR's compliance officer. Callum stood confidently at the front, flanked by two junior analysts who looked like they'd pulled an all-nighter trying to keep up. Excited to walk you through our segmentation strategy for the Lyra campaign, he began tapping the remote. Slide 1, fine. Slide 2, familiar. Slide 3, the decoy. I watched the COO Margot Lynn narrow her eyes. Her fingers paused mid-K-stroke. She leaned slightly forward. Wait, she said, cutting through Callum's monologue. These audience tiers, why are Tier 3 engagement rates projected higher than Tier 1? That contradicts your funnel logic. Callum blinked. Sorry, can you repeat that? She did slower. Your top-tier audience has a lower projected retention curve than your bottom-tier users. That's not how any of your prior modeling worked. He looked at the screen like it had betrayed him. I could almost see the sweat bead at his temple. That must be a typo, he muttered. I'll have Selvine, I'll double-check the data. Several heads turned. Margot tapped her pen. It's not a typo, it's systemic. Your logic fails on 3 tiers. Did you even vet this? He fumbled through a half answer, then offered to circle back offline. But the silence in the room was dense, uncomfortable. Executives exchanged looks. The air had shifted. I said nothing. Didn't move, didn't blink. Let it all hang there. By 2 p.m., I was back at my desk. I opened a new folder titled Grayer Attribution Archive. Inside it, I began dragging in every design file timestamp, Slack message version log, and meeting note I'd quietly saved for months. I added the dummy file. The date it was uploaded, the trail from me to him, to that screen, and I wasn't done yet. Because if the board wanted the truth, if they ever asked, I was going to have it ready, sorted, and undeniable. I drafted the resignation letter the way I approached every product handoff clean. Neutral, quietly surgical. 2 paragraphs. Gratitude for the opportunity, wishing the company continued success. No fire, no ash, no emotion, but it wasn't the only file in the envelope. Attached beneath the folded page was a 38-slide PDF, neatly formatted, indexed, and impossible to explain away. I labeled it Supplemental Documentation, Attribution and Conduct. The first section was simple side-by-side screenshots of my original design decks and Callum's final versions. Timestamps showed how mine had been saved days or weeks earlier, line by line, layout by layout. Copy-paste, change the font. That was his contribution. Next, Slack messages Callum asking me to polish pieces of work he later claimed credit for, always at the 11th hour. Can you just help make this client-ready quick sanity check on these projections? They always came just before a leadership review. Then came the HR material. Meeting notes from my random performance check-in, followed by a version control log showing I had personally authored the campaign model he failed to defend at the board meeting. I added an appendix detailing the intentional errors I'd seeded, proving he had lifted my work without understanding a word of it. Last, a formal note addressed to the board's ethics liaison and copied to HR's compliance lead. I sent the letter electronically first, printed a hard copy later, slipped both into a navy blue folder and placed it on David's desk, the VP of Strategy, early the next morning before the rest of the building woke up. By the time the first coffees were being brewed, the file had been opened twice, once by HR, once by the board. I didn't wait for confirmation. Instead, I returned to my desk and finished compiling the final draft of my personal business plan. The folder on my desktop blinked quietly in the corner, labeled simply Harlow Lab. By noon, I had packed a single box with my nameplate notebooks and the lucky pen I'd used in every launch since 2019. It was time to deliver the envelope in person. Callum's office door was slightly ajar as usual. He liked people to see him leading, though most of his leadership involved pacing during phone calls or repeating phrases he'd overheard in meetings. I knocked once out of courtesy and stepped in. He didn't look up right away. "Give me a sec. Almost done with something big," he said, waving me forward with a flourish of his pen. Then he glanced up, saw the folder in my hand, and smiled. "Ah," he said, leaning back. "You're doing the smart thing. Fresh start, yeah. Probably for the best. The culture here, it's not always easy for, solo players." I said nothing, just placed the folder on his desk. He tapped it once. Well, could have had it all sell. But hey, not everyone's cut out for politics. He opened the folder and skimmed the top page. His lips curled into a knowing smirk until they didn't. As he turned to the second document, the smile stalled. His brow furrowed. The room shifted. Flip, flip. Hands slower now, brows knit tight. By page 6, his jaw had gone slack. By page 10, he looked like someone had unplugged him from the wall. Is this a joke?" he asked, voice thin. "You sent this to HR." I gave him a small smile. Not wide, not smug, just enough. "It's already with the board." He blinked rapidly as if trying to reset the room. "Selvine, come on. This isn't how you handle things." "No," I said, turning to leave. "But it's how I handle you." I closed the door gently behind me. Back at my desk, I didn't open my inbox or check my messages. I unplugged my personal phone charger, slipped it into my bag, and picked up the box I'd packed earlier. Jessica passed by, gave me a curious glance. I nodded once. By the time I reached the elevator, a meeting had already been scheduled between HR and the board's ethics chair. I stepped inside, pressed the lobby button, and didn't look back. I was out the door before noon, walking past the Halcyon Systems logo, one final time with a box under my arm and a strange stillness in my chest. Not triumph, not regret, just clarity. By 3:30, my phone buzzed with a message from a former colleague. "You lit something up. HR and 2 board members just walked into Conference A. No one's talking." By 5, an internal memo began circulating. Callum had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review of conduct and attribution integrity. That was corporate speak, for we caught him. Over the next few days, I kept my head down. I finished revising my business plan, bought the domain name for Harlow Lab, and filed the LLC paperwork. I stayed off LinkedIn. I didn't respond to messages right away. I gave myself space to breathe. Exactly 1 week later, I received the call. The number was blocked, but the voice wasn't. It was Brennan, the CEO. Selvine, he said, measured but uneasy. The board has reviewed your documentation. First off, I want to personally apologize. We've opened a formal ethics audit, and we'd like to discuss your return. He offered reinstatement, a formal title Director of Product Vision, a raise, a public statement acknowledging a breakdown in internal communications and failure to credit rightful contributions. I let him finish. Then I said no, not out of spite, not out of pride, just because I didn't need it anymore. I appreciate the gesture, I told him, but I've already started something of my own. There was a pause, then a quiet, "We'll regret losing you." I didn't reply to that. After we hung up, I stood at the window of my apartment looking down at the city I used to see only on weekends in glimpses between deadlines. That night, I put the finishing touches on the Harlow Lab pitch deck and hit send to 3 prospective clients I'd quietly kept in touch with over the years. Within 48 hours, one replied with interest. Another asked if we could meet. The third wrote simply, "We always knew it was you behind those wins." The first day in the new space, the walls were bare, the lighting too clinical, and the desk chairs squeaked every time I moved. But it was mine. Harlow Strategy Lab, launched with no fanfare, no press release, just a Gmail account, a Squarespace site, and a list of contacts. I believed in more than titles. I took on small clients, first scrappy startups with big ideas and no legacy politics. I listened, built, iterated. I remembered what it felt like to be in a room where the work mattered more than who got the spotlight. By the 6-month mark, I'd hired a junior strategist, Mina, a brilliant recent grad who reminded me of myself, hungry, careful, unsure when to speak. The first time she presented in front of a client, she glanced at me 3 times, searching for permission to continue. Afterward, I pulled her aside. "You don't need permission," I said. "You need clarity, and you already have it." That became a rhythm. I mentored her, then another. Soon I was holding monthly roundtables for women breaking into UX, half of them carrying stories they hadn't told out loud yet. When they asked for advice, I gave them one sentence: never let them mistake your silence for absence. Because that's what I had done for too long. Waited for merit to speak louder than ego. Waited for credit to come from work alone. Now I teach them differently. To document, to speak, to build their own. One quiet afternoon between calls, a message came in from a former enterprise client. "We always knew it was you. Just wanted you to know." I stared at that sentence for a while. It didn't need a reply. The weight I used to carry the need to be recognized had shifted. I didn't need the old building or the old title. I had this one, the one with my name on the door. And this time, no one could take that away.